Hello, world. Take a pause, get to listen to the birds chatting it up early in the morning. Anyways, this video is inspired from a series of conversations I have with my kids, and particularly my daughter. And I guess the intent here is, one of these days I'm going to be gone, and ideally they miss out on my when you give your kids lectures, which I apparently do a lot. They're in the moment, they're in their chapter. Like when your kids start becoming young adults, they really are at a point where it's kind of good if they blow you off to a certain extent, because they're designed to be seeking their independence. And I mean, the way you learn, you it's good when your kids, to a certain extent, you know, don't follow your guidance. I mean, everything there's a range, but when your kids do something on their own initiative, the net of it is more positive. It's really tied to how do they process the consequences, right? So we make a decision and we take an action. Things may work out more to how you want it, or exactly how you want it, or greater, or not as good or as well as you expected or liked. So, and when that happens, one can say, well, you made a bad decision. And I really don't like the term bad decision, even though that is probably a very accurate way to depict a decision that goes far less right. Uh, I think what matters is you make a decision based off the information you have at the moment, based off the context, your emotional disposition or whatnot, and then there's a consequence. And if it's not what you expected, in one way, the decision is bad. But when things don't go as expected, I mean that's when the learning opportunity is there. And so what matters more in the big scheme of things is everything going the way you want it, or you know you have these not desired opportunities to learn and grow and build character. It's kind of like, well, what's the right answer? It's a balance, is I guess the way to say it, or which is preferred. Of course, ideally, maybe it's something that's broken out over the spectrum of time. It's like, in your life, you want your decisions to be more predictable. So as you definitely get my age, closer to the grave, you would like your decisions to be more predictable, meaning what you decide, those outcomes happen more. So maybe that's the way. That is a good way to look at it. It's like, yeah, hey, at this front end of your life, don't expect things to go your way, but that's a net positive, because if you learn how to process your bad decisions, then as you get older, things should become more predictable. Uh, and I'm not saying they always work out; it's just the outcomes are more predictable, which also means that, hey, you understand the potential outcomes of a decision you make, and can navigate it, as it either goes more towards the direction you want or maybe not. So you're managing risk is one way to look at it. Put it all back in order. So all that goes back to, uh, I guess, let me try to remember the point of this discussion. So it goes back to the core topic that inspired this session, and that goes back to how to frame it. I believe I consider myself like a hardcore American. I love this country, even though could look at the news and the political discourse and just go like, what the heck? Or you live in a more populated urban area, you know, I never thought I'd be one of those guys, but I take walks. I enjoy my community, and you're like on some trail, and you see someone you see pretty often, and you're like, "Good morning, hello," and they're just like, ugh, ugh. You're just like, what the, But I don't want to get mad at those folks. I just go like, "Hey, man, there's something going on in our society. Something has changed, and it's also the perspective. Everyone has their own drama, and so I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt, but after passing people over and over again, it's like seriously, you can't just say hello. I mean, it goes back to the founders, and it's like, and I don't think I have the quote right, but one of the things in America is the pursuit of like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think when they said pursuit of happiness, which I think people get focused on, I mean, they didn't know about the information age. They didn't know about the gamification of just everything in brain science, and that happiness is probably more of an emotional construct that could be manipulated and based off brain science. So it's just like this. It's a feeling. It's like, huh, which can be artificially induced, and we see that in gaming and advertisements and like apps on your phone, social media. It pokes at your brain and triggers responses and creates this perception of like, like a fleeting thing, right? Or like you work hard, like people who love and not all, but a lot of folks I've known, and I can relate to running marathons or chasing the next big hard event. And so you put in the effort and you train, and you get to that chapter where you do it, and it's like, oh, and then it's like, oh, I worked so hard to run this race or whatever, and then it's gone, right? The happiness goes away once you achieve the goal. Because and so in all of that, happiness, the pursuit of happiness is, to me, it's like, it's not a good objective. uh, and I work in technology, and we break requirements into two types, like non-functional and functional. uh, a functional requirement is very direct, like I want to fly to Jamaica in one day. I want to take a vacation, and I want to fly. I'm not, don't say fly. It's like, yeah, you can say that. Or I want to get to Jamaica in one day. That's my travel time. And that's a functional requirement, because you're like, oh, okay, there's a parameter, a day. So your options are, aircraft. Go to the airport. I know how to satisfy that requirement. I can go to you, is like, hey, if you take this flight, you will get there in one day. And so we have a common exit criteria. It's like, yeah, sure. But if someone's like, I want to have a safe flight or a good flight, or I want to enjoy my travel time to Jamaica. So now it's like, it's very non-functional. It's not like, oh, well. Now we gotta like qualify that to get to some functional requirements. It's like, so for example, like, well, what's your definition of safe? you know, what are the things that I can act on? So if you take those two perspectives, uh, and you look at happiness, it's, I don't know how to action happiness. Uh, and then what I understand per life is that happiness is like an emotional outcome, and typically, and I like this saying that happiness, the extent of one's happiness is a consequence of the depths of one's suffering. So understanding that, the only way you get to happiness is not to pursue the comfort, the luxury, run to the sunshine where everyone's like smiling and high-fiving. It's like happiness is found through dark tunnels. You have to go and do hard, challenging, not comfortable things. Because at the end of those endeavors, you will experience and see happiness. It's kind of like when I used the earlier example of people who train for marathons, ultras, or whatever. It's like, they put in all this effort, the daily discipline, the grind of constantly doing the uncomfortable, seeking the uncomfortable, and then they have this huge uncomfortable moment. And it's only then, as they get close, they get that, happy moment. It's also like dominating in sports. It's like you just don't show up and win. You have to go through all this unfun, and then you get, there's fun that can be developed in the grind, but but that's the only way you experience like the victory. It's like anyone who's like competed. It's when you get the easy win, you feel pretty good because like woo, woo, relief, right? Uh, but it's the hard like fights, challenges where you win. Then that's where the broader sense of success comes from. And I say because when I competed in fun sports stuff, I did not like close margins of victory. I actually was happier, or I was more content with losing in some ways because it's like that was a definitive result, and either you were outclassed or whatever. Sometimes was, but when you barely won, it's kind of like, yeah. I mean, I mean, there's so much work, you know. When you're close, it's like I don't know. I just was not as happy with close wins, right? And they weren't as satisfying. Big wins were whatever. Anyways, that I like to wander off topics. But when we're having a conversation, I like to stop and check out all the roses to get to the destination. So, anyways, just I'll stop at qualifying. Like, look, happiness. Well, I do not believe happiness is something you should pursue. It is a measure of if what you're doing is on track. So you'll experience happiness. So that's actually the accurate context for me. It's like, I pick goals, and I know I'm going. It's my azimuth or where I'm going is good because I'll have these moments of happiness, right? Uh, and actually, I think of all these videos, like you see memes and TikTok, and you're like, I'm happy, I choose happiness, and I would post one, but it's like, man, I don't want to demean some other human being or whatnot, but they're all over there, and so it's not a good goal. So, what is a good goal? Well, for life, and there's a lot of things you could target because that's not a simple black and white answer. But what I think everyone should pursue, and I'll pretext this with I often also say life is a journey in one's head. We kind of just have to do things. So based off the individuals and their predispositions, context, it's like to get from A to B in life. Some of us have to, do different things in the world to get to that place in our heads where we all want to go. Others are, they may get there a little bit easier. And so that the destination you want to get to, and I pause because I'm like, dude, it's like in my world, as I grew up, it's like, dude, seriously, you talking about that? But what you want is to achieve self-love, right? Let me qualify that before you think I'm some wishy-washy dude. So So self love is not like, oh yeah, of course you want to love yourself, yeah, yeah, whatever. Self love is very specific to me. I have a functional definition. So self love, and it goes back to the early piece, is you know, so self love is a state, and you're there, and well, you never fully get there per se, but it's two things. It's the ability to have the absolute confidence to make a decision for yourself, right? And you may ask for advice and you may research or do whatever, but when the time comes, you're like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And if that decision is more right or less right, it goes back to the bad decisions. You have the maturity to have accountability on why that decision is less right or bad, and forgive yourself to the extent that you reestablish the confidence to make decisions for yourself, right? It's a cycle, and it's like, and the more you the faster you can cycle through that, then you'll start to appreciate, like, what's the terms, like agency, or you have self love, like, because you can look at yourself, have the humility to understand, like, hey, what you could have done better, or whatever, and still believe in the person who has to call the shots in your life. And no matter how things work out, you learn from it, uh, and actually gain confidence to make that decision again or something similar. So that is, in the end, you know, where you have self love, and when you get to that point, I mean, you'll know it because you have to be confident in yourself. Now, easier said than done. Uh, and one facet of it, before I get into that facet, and one reason why, like, another perspective to get it, when I talked earlier about, yeah, your kids need to make some decisions that you want them to disagree with you to a certain extent. And why is that? Because when you stack things, or if you break apart, like, well, let's start from wisdom. So everyone wants, wisdom is something we want to acquire. And why is that? Because that's the thing that allows us to make good, predictable, better decisions in our lives. So every time we make a mistake and not do things as well, or good or bad decision, we acquire wisdom by taking an action and getting a result, whatever that experience is between the decision and the result. Well, that becomes wisdom, right? And so how does that work? Like, if the person was a machine, so that you have this, like, database, which you make decisions, and at the bottom is just data, and then you have informations atop of data. Like, data is like immutable facts. Like 1 + 1 = 2. And information, it's a combination of data uh, that conveys something factual. Or I wouldn't say it's necessarily factual, but it conveys something. And then you have knowledge, right? And knowledge, a lot of people think, like, oh, you're knowledgeable. Yeah, that's the fajizzle. You know this, you know that, right? But all knowledge is the foundation that allows you to make a decision, right? Or draw a conclusion. And once you draw a conclusion or make a decision, and I like to focus on decisions, and you take an action, and that experience between the decision and the action, well, then you get wisdom. And so why is that important? It's like, a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot, but yeah, it's true. They stop themselves at knowledge, and they don't take action. And Bruce Lee has a great quote. And if I can find it, I'll overlay it over somewhere in here. Pause. All right, and then I'm back. Somewhere in there might be this thing. But Bruce Lee, like, he succinctly articulates that, you know that, knowledge, wisdom is acquired through action. right? So, for example, you can read a book on how to make a fire and memorize everything and learn every technique to make a fire, or even changing it, your tire on your car. It's like, talk about people thinking like, oh my gosh, but if you never go out and change a tire, you don't have the practical experience and our wisdom of, changing a tire. It's a big delta. So a lot of folks like will learn about a thing or do something and and, and they just stop there. And I see it a lot in my field where folks who can lead, there's that other concept of growth mindset, but people who can confidently lead and push things, and it's because you know, they have self love, they have agency, they become comfortable with, yeah, you're never going to make a perfect decision, right? But you'll learn on the way and self correct. And so as you build more wisdom and confidence in how you come to decisions, but you come to more decisive, you're more confident, you more importantly feel safer in things. So that's a really critical distinction or perspective to have uh, to enable yourself to get to self love. Another simple example of where you can see it in your life where I don't know, there's a job and there's dating and all this stuff, and what at that point in time, and you hesitate. Well, if you don't act, you'll never know. Like one of the things I did with my kids when they were younger is we would go on we do a lot of hikes, do whatever. We got to eat or go to the store. I always encourage like two things. It's like, if you, it's almost like you never make the shots you don't take. So if sometimes if a kid would ask like for an outrageous thing, like, can I have this ridiculous candy bar or something? Sometimes I'd be like, all right, sure. They'd be like, what? Because I want them to like, hey man, if you want something in life, you gotta poke, you gotta ask. So sometimes it works out, right? Or I remember once with my oldest kid, and I'm not, I think I'm a good dad, but I'm a bad dad, and he was like, grapefruit juice. And he's like, I'll say, hey man, the only way to know is to find out. I'd say that. Hopefully my kids, I'm all saying, so like, yeah, go ahead and order it. If you're curious, order it, and knowing that it would taste horrible. And so you order it, and it's like, and it's like, well, now you know, right? So that's another, you the only way you know is to find out. You see a pretty girl or guy and you like them, you want to know if you get something out of that one, you gotta go say hello. It's better to find out, it's better to know, it's better to fail than to sit there comfortably with knowledge and do nothing, unless it's like life and death crazy stuff, and sometimes that's okay also. So yeah, there's that, and then you're like, oh, he lost his thread. He was looking at that flower and got lost where he was going. Well, you know, those are I'll just sum it up with that. It's like, it is. Oh, I remember what I was gonna talk about. So it's the second other piece. The birds they just had their coffee, and they are humming. So the other piece, to help you, get to agency, get to self love, is you gotta learn to be honest with yourself, and that's like the hardest one. Now I consider myself fortunate in I was I was like, I'm just a sincere kid, and so my mom made me go to church, and you learn about like the Ten Commandments, all this stuff, and you're just like, oh, I mean, those are the rules. So, as a young kid, I was like, I took that for real. Uh, and then later you learn, like, well, why don't the adults follow these? Well, what's going on here? It's like, because again, you impress on a kid. This is the will of God, and God is everything. And so, I mean, I gotta do so. Uh, that helped though create this perspective of the emotional accountability to be honest about things to myself. So that was the start of it. And I don't go to church today, but that's a whole different conversation because a lot of people need to go to church. I mean, uh, even though I don't, and I probably won't. But I'll just say in our society, uh, in America, in the Western world, I mean, church isn't necessarily a bad thing. And a lot of people, my generation, Gen X, we all were made to go to church. A lot of us have, and so you're like, oh wait, so we exist with Christian values or Judeo-Christian values, which is in the bigger sense a good thing. And the last sidebar on that, which as a person who doesn't go to church, I mean, I can acknowledge and go like, hey, what's the best world? It's the Western world, and you know, why isn't there slavery? Why are there like democratic, republic, parliamentary, whatever type governments that you know, think individuals have rights and stuff? They're Christian, Judeo-Christian based societies. What societies ban slavery? Judeo-Christian societies. What what cultures like dominated technologically, and thus we're able to go around the world and just crush everybody. And that is in the root of the whole Judeo-Christian whatever is the respect of the individual's right to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, so people are incentivized to lean in and do great things and contribute and all of that. So, anyways, you can go out there and yes, there's separation of church and state, but there's a reason why the greatest, awesomest places to live in the world are, you know, go from that religious background. And if and that's just a historical fact, right? So don't like commenting about like you I don't know whatever, but it's just a historical fact. And when you look at other societies and they have a more hierarchical religious cultural construct where the masses serve a smaller group, and that tends to not work out. It doesn't scale well, or the quality of life it just doesn't scale well, and that's the reality of it. So take that as you perceive the world the way you want to. I try to see things factually. So we go back to uh, being honest with oneself. So one facet is church, the other is Star Trek, where I was influenced, which was I didn't like this character as a kid, but I totally respected and liked how chill they were, and that was Spock. Like Spock from the planet Vulcan. While all the other characters are just emotionally turbulent, and Spock was like, I'm not hampered by emotions, and I'm focused on the facts, and so watching Star Trek and the contrast of his character with typical humans, I was like, dude, freaking, I dug the Spock character, and it was like, hey man, that put me in this perspective of like, I have to be emotionally accountable. Like I need to, be honest with myself, see things objectively, and that really, it's crazy how much that's informed like uh, my critical thinking. So that was like the foundation. And so for you personally, it's like, well, how do you be honest to yourself? You have to practice that because you have this thing called ego, and ego ego is there to protect you, but sometimes it can be overprotective. And actually, oftentimes, based off the societal construct you live in, which in our Western world, information age, your ego is, it doesn't have the boundaries I would say it should. And it's not your friend. I think if you're in the Western world, I could say this with confidence. Your ego is not your friend. Uh, So you should guard against it because it will allow you to lie to yourself and come up for reasons like things didn't work out. That's why I love sports to a certain extent. Uh, but a lot of stuff gets corrupted. But in sports, if you lose and people get mad at losing and try to take away the other teams or the other individuals' victory by oh, scoring this or come up with excuses like nah. I mean that's the ego. That kind of thinking gets you in trouble. It's like when you lose, it is possible that you lost because of the refs and judging, and that would mean it was a really close game and there's a specific call. But like in the fight business, I like how it's like, hey, don't leave it to the judges, because that's a consequence that can happen. And so the way you manage, you dominate and knock that person out or whatnot. So it's like that is a accountable way of thinking, to recognize you didn't train well, you didn't have your team winning. So the ego wants to give you answers so you don't have to face the consequence of your negligence and lacking. So you have to practice being honest to yourself. You have to practice, and there's times, and I'm not going to tell you, like I don't believe in lying, absolutely, uh, but I do recognize that you don't. Misleading is a necessary facet of life. And misleading could be, withholding information, allowing folks to draw conclusions that they should draw conclusions for themselves and not correcting them. But to outright lie, it's like, oof, yeah, I don't know how to do that one. And I say that because again, a simple example is, you go to someone's house and they cook you a meal and they're like, so it's the best meal ever. Here, try it, and you're like, you know, you know, you don't want to be honest to the point where you're like, man, this is, ma'am, I appreciate it, but this tastes like ass. No, you don't want to be that person. You want to be like, oh, no, this is great, thank you. Uh, it's not something I enjoy or I don't like. You can say, and there's ways to navigate the situations and color what your truth is, so you're respectful of their feelings to a certain extent or whatnot. So it's like, or at work, oh, we could talk work separately, but don't think it's wrong to tell anyone that you should absolutely not lie. I mean, you shouldn't lie, but the misrepresenting facts apparently is the way the world is now. I want to qualify that is that I I don't play in gray spaces because I'm sincere. I actively engage in lying, so avoid situations where I'm cornered and ever have to go like, oh, come up with a falsehood, or false report. So it's not a concern of mine because that's a different. It's the way I actively do stuff. It's everything I do is sincere, and with that, you have the foresight to avoid circumstances that you don't want. So, but not everyone's like that, and they get themselves in situations, and unfortunately, a lot of environments they're really, I guess the word is toxic or whatnot, and so it's like, yeah, it's what it is. So, anyways, you got to be honest with yourself. So, in summary, this morning coffee talk. happiness, it's silly to try to pursue happiness. Uh, it's a measure of, if you're on path or your journey. I encourage any young person, anyone, is seek self-love as I laid it out, which is requires a high personal accountability, and it will lead to self-confidence, and also, it, it will it will make you more resistant to, I'll call it, like, emotional trauma. Like, I unfortunately, went through the military and whatever, you know, have been close with folks with addiction disorders. And I don't like to use the word alcoholism or any of that stuff, because it's like, well, once they stop drinking, I mean, well, why are we? To me, it's whatever. But in the end, the lack of, a lot of things are rooted in the lack of, are not having self love, which is that absolute confidence to trust your decisions and understand your role in the consequence of your life. So it's like you get those habits, like, there's emotional paths in lives that you can't wander down. So, you know, you stay in this lane to, the life is a journey in your head. Wherever B is, you stay in a safe lane, and maybe, you won't be, happy, joy all the time, but you're cool with life no matter whatever. Uh, there you go.